The night was quiet, the kind of stillness that amplified every sound. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, and the soft rustle of paper in Claire's hands. She stared at the receipt, her stomach sinking. It wasn't just any receipt. It was for a dinner at a restaurant she'd never been to on a night her husband, Mark, claimed to be working late. Claire wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but lately, the signs were hard to ignore. The late-night texts he tried to hide, his sudden obsession with his appearance, and now this receipt. It felt as though the foundation of her marriage was crumbling beneath her feet. Confronting him wasn't easy. When she finally did, Mark denied it at first, his face a mix of shock and defensiveness. But Claire had done her homework. There was no denying the evidence she'd pieced together. Eventually, he confessed. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was an affair that had been going on for months. The revelation was a blow, but Claire refused to let it define her. She sought advice from friends, family, and a therapist, each offering a different perspective. Some urged her to leave immediately, while others encouraged her to consider whether the relationship could be salvaged. Claire chose to take her time. She didn't want her decision to be driven by anger or heartbreak. She focused on herself first, diving into activities she loved but had neglected, like painting and yoga. Slowly, she rebuilt her confidence and rediscovered who she was outside of her marriage. Mark, on the other hand, expressed genuine remorse. He attended therapy sessions to understand why he'd strayed and worked to regain Claire's trust. It wasn't easy. Every step forward felt fragile, as if one wrong move could shatter their progress. In the end, Claire decided to give their marriage another chance, but on her terms. They built a new foundation, one grounded in open communication, boundaries, and mutual respect. While the scars of betrayal didn't fade completely, they served as a reminder of how far they'd come. The experience taught Claire that infidelity doesn't have to mark the end of a relationship, but it does signal a need for change. Whether that change means parting ways or starting anew together depends on the willingness of both partners to face the truth and grow. Above all, Claire learned the importance of valuing herself, no matter what. As the months passed, Claire and Mark worked hard to mend their relationship. Therapy became a weekly ritual, not just for Mark but for both of them as a couple. Their counselor, Dr. Evans, guided them through the painful process of unpacking the affair and addressing the underlying issues in their marriage. It was a journey filled with tears, moments of doubt, and small breakthroughs. One evening after a particularly intense session, Mark hesitated before speaking. "I know I've said this before, but I need you to hear it again. I'm sorry, Claire. Not just for what I did, but for the way I made you feel like you weren't enough. That was never true. The problem was me, not you." Claire's eyes brimmed with tears. She wanted to believe him, and some days she did. But trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. "I appreciate that, Mark. I really do. But it's going to take time, and I need you to be patient with me." Mark nodded. He didn't push for forgiveness or reassurance. Instead, he showed his commitment in small, consistent ways. Being present, keeping his promises, and listening without defensiveness when Claire expressed her pain or fears. Meanwhile, Claire found herself growing stronger. She continued to nurture her independence, spending time with friends, pursuing her hobbies, and even taking a solo trip to the mountains, a dream she'd long put on hold. It was during this time apart that Claire realized how much she had changed. She was no longer the woman who had once overlooked her own needs for the sake of her marriage. When she returned home, something felt different. The weight of the betrayal, while still present, no longer consumed her. She and Mark had reached a new understanding. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was honest. They had learned to confront challenges head-on, rather than letting them fester in silence. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Mark reached for Claire's hand. "I know we still have work to do," he said, "but I'm grateful you gave me this chance. I don't deserve it, but I'll never take it for granted again." Claire looked at him, her heart a mix of hope and caution. "It's not about deserving, Mark. It's about whether we both want this enough to keep trying. And they did. Their marriage wasn't what it once was. It was something entirely new. The affair had shattered the illusion of perfection, but in its place was a relationship forged in resilience and hard-earned trust. Claire knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace with the path they had chosen. In the end, Claire's journey was about more than saving her marriage. It was about saving herself, rediscovering her strength, and learning that love, whether for another person or for oneself, is most powerful when it is honest, forgiving, and whole. Months turned into a year, and the anniversary of Mark's confession arrived. It was a quiet, introspective day for Claire. She spent the morning journaling, reflecting on how far she had come, not just as a wife, but as an individual. That evening, Mark surprised her with a letter. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but it was heartfelt. In it, he acknowledged every way he had hurt her and thanked her for her strength and grace. He also admitted how the process had changed him, forcing him to confront parts of himself he'd long ignored. As Claire read his words, she realized something profound. She no longer felt like a victim. The pain of his betrayal had once defined her, but now it was just one chapter in her story. They spent the evening talking, not just about the past, but about the future. For the first time in years, they dreamed together about trips they wanted to take, projects they wanted to start, and how they could keep growing as individuals and as partners. Trust, though fragile, had begun to rebuild. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of insecurity and doubt, but they faced them together. Each small victory, Mark being open about his whereabouts, Claire choosing to believe in his honesty, added another brick to the foundation they were rebuilding. Their relationship was different now, shaped by the lessons of the past. They had learned the importance of communication, vulnerability, and setting boundaries. Claire had also embraced the idea that loving Mark didn't mean losing herself again. She set aside time for her passions and friendships, and Mark respected that. One day, as they prepared dinner together in the kitchen, Claire caught herself smiling. It wasn't a forced smile or one meant to hide pain. It was genuine. She realized she was happy, not because everything was perfect, but because she was living authentically. Their journey was far from over. There would be more hurdles, more difficult conversations, and moments of doubt. But Claire no longer feared those challenges. She had faced the worst and emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Mark, too, had grown. He understood now that love wasn't just about words or grand gestures. It was about consistency, respect, and showing up every single day. As they sat down to eat, Mark raised his glass. "To us," he said. "Not the us we used to be, but the us we're becoming." Claire clinked her glass against his, her heart full of cautious hope and quiet joy. "To us," she replied. Their story wasn't about forgetting or pretending the past didn't happen. It was about choosing to move forward one step at a time, with open hearts and unwavering honesty. And for Claire, that was enough. As the years passed, the lessons Claire and Mark had learned became the bedrock of their new life together. They leaned into the philosophy that growth was continuous, and that a marriage could thrive only when both partners were committed to personal and shared evolution. Claire found herself embracing new challenges with a courage she hadn't realized she possessed. She started a small art business, selling her paintings and hosting workshops. It was a dream she had set aside years ago, but now pursued with Mark's full support. He often helped her set up for events, proud of her accomplishments and grateful to witness her flourish. Mark also grew in ways Claire hadn't expected. He not only worked on his own insecurities and emotional maturity, but became an advocate for healthier relationships among their circle of friends. He spoke openly about his mistakes, owning them without self-pity, and shared how he and Claire had rebuilt their trust. One day, as they were packing for a weekend getaway, a tradition they'd started to keep their relationship fresh and exciting, Mark paused. "Do you ever regret staying with me?" he asked, his voice tinged with vulnerability. Claire turned to him, surprised. "I used to wonder if I'd made the right choice," she admitted, but not anymore. The work we've done, on ourselves, on us, has given me a sense of peace I didn't think was possible. I don't regret staying because it taught me how strong I am, and it showed me that you're capable of change. Mark smiled, relief and gratitude evident in his eyes. I don't deserve you, he said softly. You don't need to deserve me, Claire replied. You just need to keep being the person you are now. The one who shows up, who tries, who cares. Their getaway that weekend wasn't extravagant, but it was filled with laughter, quiet moments of connection, and a renewed appreciation for how far they had come. Back home, life continued with its inevitable ups and downs. But Claire no longer feared the struggles. She knew now that no relationship could promise unbroken happiness, but with effort, respect, and love, it could promise resilience. Every so often, Claire would reflect on the woman she had been on that night. She found the receipt. The woman whose world seemed to collapse in an instant. She didn't pity her past self. Instead, she honored her strength and the choices that had led to the life she now cherished. Claire and Mark's story wasn't one of perfection, but one of redemption. Together, they proved that while betrayal could break a relationship, it didn't have to define it. What defined them was a decision to face the hardest truths, to choose growth over comfort, and to love not despite their flaws, but because of the commitment to work through them. And in the quiet moments, as they sat side by side watching the sun dip below the horizon, Claire knew she had made the right choice. Not just in staying with Mark, but in choosing herself every step of the way. As the seasons changed, so did Claire and Mark. Their life together became a mosaic of the lessons they had learned and the love they continued to nurture. The challenges of rebuilding their marriage had taught them the value of intentionality. Every conversation, every action carried the weight of meaning and care. Their community began to notice the transformation in them. Friends and family who had doubted their decision to stay together were surprised by the strength of their bond. Claire's sister, who had initially urged her to leave, admitted one day over coffee, "I didn't think it was possible, but you and Mark, you've shown me what forgiveness and growth can look like. It's inspiring." Claire smiled, understanding the skepticism, but feeling proud of how far they had come. "It wasn't easy," she said, "but it was worth it. For both of us." Mark continued to show up in ways Claire hadn't expected. On their second new anniversary, he presented her with a scrapbook. It was filled with photos, notes, and memories of the life they had rebuilt together. At the back was a handwritten letter. In the letter, Mark wrote, "Claire, you are my second chance, not just at our marriage, but at becoming the man I should have been all along. You didn't just forgive me. You challenged me to be better. And for that, I am endlessly grateful. I know I can never undo the hurt I caused, but I promise to spend every day honoring the trust we've rebuilt. Thank you for believing in me, and for believing in us." Claire's heart swelled as she read his words. They were a reminder of the resilience they had cultivated together and the life they had reclaimed from the ashes of betrayal. Years turned into decades, and Claire and Mark's love story became one of enduring strength. They celebrated milestones with joy, but never forgot the journey that had brought them there. They often shared their story with others, not to glorify the pain, but to show that healing was possible when both partners were willing to fight for it. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the ocean during their retirement years, Mark turned to Claire. "If you could go back and change anything, would you?" Claire thought for a moment, the waves crashing softly in the distance. "There's a part of me that wishes we hadn't gone through the pain," she said honestly. "But then, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be who we are now. And I love who we've become." Mark squeezed her hand, his eyes misty. "I do too." Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, an enduring testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the courage to start over. They had proven that even in the face of the deepest wounds, it was possible to create something beautiful. As the twilight of their lives stretched into soft, golden years, Claire and Mark embraced a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. Their home became a haven filled with the warmth of family gatherings, the laughter of grandchildren, and the quiet moments they shared, still savoring the connection they had worked so hard to rebuild. One afternoon, while organizing old boxes in the attic, Claire stumbled upon a collection of her journals. They spanned decades, their pages filled with the raw emotions of heartbreak, healing, and hope. Sitting by the window, she leafed through them, marveling at the arc of her own journey. Mark climbed the attic stairs, curious about her silence. "What's this?" he asked, spotting the journals scattered around her. "My old journals," Claire said, smiling. "It's strange to look back at how far we've come." Mark knelt beside her, picking up a journal. "Do you ever wonder if I was worth all of it? All the pain, the work, the risk?" Claire placed a hand on his. "It's not about whether you were worth it, Mark. It's about whether we were worth it. And we were. We are." Her words seemed to settle into him, a quiet reassurance he still needed after all these years. Later that evening, Mark surprised Claire by proposing something unexpected: writing a book together. "Not for the world," he clarified quickly. "Just for us, for our kids, our grandkids, so they can know what love looks like when it's messy, hard, and real." Claire hesitated at first. The idea of exposing their most vulnerable moments felt daunting, even if it was only for their family. But the more they talked about it, the more it felt like the right thing to do. Over the next year, they wrote side by side. The book became more than just a record of their marriage. It was a testament to resilience, a love letter to the people they had become, and a guide for those who might one day find themselves standing at the crossroads of betrayal and forgiveness. When the book was finished, they printed just a handful of copies. At their 50th wedding anniversary celebration, surrounded by friends and family, they handed the books to their children and grandchildren. "This isn't just our story," Claire said, her voice steady but emotional. "It's a reminder that love isn't always easy or perfect. But when it's worth it, you fight for it. And sometimes, the fight brings you something even more beautiful than what you started with." Mark added, "We want you to know that no matter what challenges you face, whether in love or life, you can overcome them with honesty, courage, and faith in yourself." Their family embraced them with gratitude and admiration. Over the years, those books became cherished keepsakes, passed down as symbols of hope and wisdom. In their final years, Claire and Mark continued to live with the same intentionality that had defined their second chapter. When Mark passed away first, Claire mourned deeply but found solace in the life they had rebuilt together. She often told her grandchildren, "Your grandfather wasn't perfect, and neither was I. But together, we created something extraordinary. And that's the greatest legacy we could leave." When Claire's time came, she departed this world with peace in her heart, knowing she had lived a life of love, courage, and authenticity. Their story wasn't one of fairy tale perfection. It was something far greater. It was a testament to the power of forgiveness, the beauty of resilience, and the truth that even after the darkest storms, the sun can shine again.